Dear students, after reading this module, you will be able to understand stress and different types of stressors. Learn what are the factors that are adversely affect the physical health of the elderly. Learn the role of cognitive appraisals and coping styles in influencing perceived stress. You'll be able to know the prevalence of stress in the elderly and also the techniques for coping with stress. Stress is known as the imbalance in our physiological and psychological state resulting from the disparity between situational demand and the individual's ability and motivation to meet those needs. The concept of stress is described as the rate of all wear and tear caused by life by Hans Selye. Stress can be of two types, positive and negative. Positive stress or eustress is when the situation offers an opportunity to a person to gain something. It is a motivator for some best performance. Negative stress or de-stress is when a person faces social, physical, organizational and emotional problems. Factors that causes stress are called stressors. Stress is when our body reacts to a change that requires a physical, mental or emotional adjustment. Stress is also caused by a situation or thought that makes you feel frustrated, angry, nervous or anxious. Change and challenge and a chronic battle with the clock can become a way of life rather than an unusual event. In addition, the slowly evolving decrements in physical and cognitive capabilities gradually encourage on the aging individual and may lead to a sense of frustration or fear that is associated with the notion that the individual is caught up in a stress. Stressors. Stressors come in many sizes and shapes. As mean of categorizing and evaluating these differences, 3 levels of stressors are identified. These levels are micro, the meso and the macro level. Classification of stressors. First, the micro level. At the micro level, the focus is on the day-to-day experiences of people, the stressors of everyday life, example including running out of toothpaste, getting caught in a traffic jam or finding your child in the bathroom just when you are in a rush to take a shower. The most commonly experienced stressors, micro stressors, are also the least studied. Hassles have a stronger influences on our mental health and well-being as compared to exposure to the more well-known life events. The meso level. Well-known life events research fall into this category, as do adults of transition and more chronic or durable stressors. Meso-level stressors, especially events that take place in our life, have been seen to predict all sorts of physical, psychological and social dysfunctions, everything in fact from general psychiatry, symptomatology to depression. The macro level. The stresses at the macro level impact first upon society at a large and only secondary on the individual. The threat of war, the bad economic news, a flurry of near misses in the airplanes, or a spill of environmentally hazardous material not only make the headlines but can create anxiety and a generally heightened sense of distress on the part of the populace. Factors that influence health of the elderly. Stress models are predicted on the assumption that stressful life events, life crises and chronic stressor threaten the equilibrium of the person and may adversely affect the quality of life. The stress exposure may be viewed as stimulus which is in the absence resource threaten the health. Ill health and physical impairment represents universal source of stress for older people across societies. Negative sequel of illness related stressors are widely reported. Nevertheless, moderator between illness and the quality of life are considered only on the most general level. During the 20th century, there was a lot of decline in birth rate and life expectancy increased markedly. Chronic degenerative illness had substituted infectious and acute illness in older adults. Biopsychosocial model was applied by the health psychologist which says that illness in old age were not only the result of biological and physical factors but also psychological, social and behavioral factors. As per the model, the biological factors causes the decline and also change the state of many diseases from acute to chronic, which influences the physical functioning and progression of the diseases and illness. As the age of the person increases, the homeostasis of that person becomes more difficult to be maintained, which invites illness and diseases in the old person's body and can lead to mortality too. The following are the 4 ways through which old age gets affected by psychological factors. The importance of psychosocial factors for health are seen in early life. Many important health behaviors that have consequences for health and illness in later adulthood represent established patterns that emerge in childhood and young adulthood, with adverse health effects often becoming evident by middle adulthood. Other psychosocial factors that predict morbidity may begin even earlier in the life course, with some researchers arguing that the precursors of risk factor for cardiovascular diseases and other chronic illness common to old age are present at birth. Psychosocial factors may also operate to influence concurrent health status in later life. Some factors, such as the nature of one's life stages, and therefore do not necessarily have unique effect in old age. The health and lifespan of the person is affected by the quality of social interactions. The changing circumstances of later adulthood can create challenges that are relatively unique to this life stage or that alter previously stable psychological processes. Although emotional experiences affect the health, but the nature of emotional experiences and the processes of emotion regulation exhibit developmental shift. As the person gets older, he experiences reduction in physical reserve capacity and loss of homeostasis. All risk factors lead to greater vulnerability. It has been seen that older people experience lower life satisfaction and lower affective well-being compared to the younger adults. The theory of strength and vulnerability integration, SAVI, explains how older adults can experience reductions in physical health yet maintain relatively high level of emotional well-being. It postulates that with growing age, the elderly become more adept at using behaviors and thought processes to reduce exposure to negative life experiences. The older population gradually acquires this feat as they gain an understanding into their vulnerabilities and limitations. This theory postulates that in the situation in which older people experience higher level of distress, emotion regulation strategies will be lessened and the psychological consequences of sustained emotional arousal will be more costly for older adults. The socio-emotional selectivity theory shares some postulates with SAVI theory. According to socio-emotional selective theory, all people have a conscious or unconscious awareness of how much time they have left to live, and chronological age is associated with this recognition of limited time. Old age people focus more on their emotional goals when they know that they have a limited period of time left with them. By combining their previous life experiences, old age people focus less on negative experiences and engage themselves more in positive experiences. This selective avoidance is evident in studies using attention and memory paradigms. When older people realize that not much time is left with them, then they shift their attention to more emotionally meaningful events and make all the more efforts to achieve emotional goals. Health engagements and control strategies protect old people with daily physical symptoms. Psychosocial factors influence health in a later adulthood not only by influencing psychological adaptation to decline health efforts to initiate and sustain health enhancing behavior, whether in the context of prevention or treatment and rehabilitation. Psychosocial factors influence health in old age not only by psychological adapting the decline health, but also by affecting the degree of success that is seen in the efforts to initiate and sustain health enhancing behaviors. The association between some risk factors and disease does decline with age, but the association between other risk factors and disease persists or even increases with age. Psychological disorders resulting from stress. Organic disorders of the brain are often referred to as senile dementia. This group of disorders are chronic progressive degeneration of mental function due to vascular or other conditions. Presenting symptoms include loss of memory and cognition and behavioral disturbances. Current estimates suggest that between 6 to 10% of the elderly living at home have some degree of clinical identifiable organic disturbances. Proportion with an organic disorder increases with age, and it's higher in women than men at all the ages. Again, even in every oldest age group, only a third of all elderly experiences some degree of organic brain failure, and then usually not to such an extent that it impairs their ability to function normally in the community. From this table, it can be seen that instances and severity of organic disorder increases with age. Functional or affective disorder comprises a variety of states such as anxiety, depression, and disturbances of mood. One manifestation of psychological ill health is suicidal behavior. Now, we'll talk about mechanism through which stressors affect health of the elderly and the role of different coping mechanisms. To explore mechanism by which stressors affect psychological well-being and identity, several lines of inquiry have been followed. The first one relates to attribution of meaning to adverse events and is prevalent in sociological and social psychological research. If adverse events are perceived as an opportunity to grow and uses one's coping skill, a person is more likely to bounce back from stress. A second approach focuses on appraisal of threat and stress and has been generally pursued in the field of psychology. Within this framework, problem-focused coping refers to active efforts to solve the problem, whereas emotion-focused coping aims at maintenance of psychological well-being in the face of problem situations. Persons attributing more negative meaning to a stressful event are more likely to exhibit long-term signs of distress and are less likely to undergo positive transformation. Appraisal of continuing threat of the post-trauma may also reflect the structural context of increased stress exposure. A second approach to the study of coping with stressor focuses on the type of cognitive, emotion and behavioral adaptation individuals invoke as they encounter stressful life situation. Cognitive responses include positive comparison, denial or reinterpretation of stress. Escapist or avoidant coping strategies may also reflect cognitive orientation. Emotional regulation and emotional focused coping appear to have strong cultural components. Active, positive or instrumental coping strategies are also referred to as problem-focused coping, which represent constructive responses to stress. Leading developmental theories have focused on accommodative or compensatory strategies for older persons as they deal with limitation by reducing energy expenditures. Thus, older adults may select more highly valued activities and focus their resources on maintaining them. Such accommodative coping has been found to benefit older adults facing disability. Older persons also engage in social selectivity, focusing on close family members and friends and emphasizing strong over weak ties. To the extent that cumulative stress increases with age, older adults are likely to have developed a broader array of coping skills and perspective that helps them regulate their responses to stressful situations. Recent interest by gerontologists in the concept of wisdom explores its connections to successful coping efforts. Religious coping has many alternate definitions including attendance, prayer or trusting God. Religious coping has been useful in dealing with negative late life transition and has been related to positive health among hospitalized older adults. In stress paradigm, mediators between stressor and adverse quality of life outcomes have been conceptualized primarily in terms of social resources or support and cognitive or behavioral coping resources. Prevalence of stress in elderly. Life stress is a product of change that occurs in one's life that requires adaptation, coping, and social readjustment. As aging is considered a series of physiological, psychological, and psychosocial changes, these factors further predispose elderly to increased risk to develop stress. A comparative study was undertaken by Kaur and other researchers in 2006 to understand and compare psychosocial stressor in geriatric population of urban and rural setting in Ludhiana, Punjab, India. The objective was to identify and compare psychosocial stressors of such population among urban and rural population. 60 geriatric subjects were selected by systematic random sampling. A standardized tool, that is Stoke-Gordon stress scale, was used to determine psychosocial stress among elderly. Findings revealed that about 93% and 70% of the subjects were in the mild psychosocial stress in urban and rural areas respectively, while 30% of the rural subjects were in the moderate psychological stress. Rural elderly population was found more stressed than urban elderly population. Such studies shed light on high prevalence of stress among the elderly population due to increased problems like reduced sleep, reduced communication, decreased involvement in work and play, etc. The effects of chronic stress are on an increase in the older population. Coping with stress. Coping with stress is of paramount importance in the elderly. The older people suffer from stress due to loss of friends, spouse, due to death, grief, loss, bereavement, loneliness, deterioration, physical health. Physical exercise is said to offer the best cure to manage stress. Physical exercise helps slow down the rate of physical deterioration of health, which is a major cause of stress in the elderly. In Japan, provisions of physical exercise at the workplace are made compulsory with every break in tune with biological rhythm, whereas in India, natural cycle of activity, that is work and rest, are completely ignored. Some of the methods of coping with stress are discussed. First, yoga. Yoga is holistic science concerned with all aspects of human functioning. It involves various body postures and breathing exercises. Yoga improves the sense of physical and mental well-being, which in turn reduces stress. Relaxation removes fatigue and drive attention away from the stressful situation. It is useful in managing a prolonged stressful situation more effectively. Different people respond differently to relaxation activities. Meditation. Meditation is of far great importance than medication for whatever afflicts mankind today. It is a mental relaxation technique which has proved to be of immense value to relieve stress and re-energize the body, reduce psychological problems such as anxiety and depression, and lead to better emotional and physical health. Practicing meditation results in tranquility and peace of mind. It helps in lowering the pulse and heart rate, induces a more objective thinking process with an unbroken and maintained concentration. The commonly practiced technique of meditation are yoga and relaxation responses. Next technique is biofeedback. Biofeedback is a specific relaxation technique which is now being used for treating psychosomatic disorders like hypertension, tension, headaches, migraines, headaches, backaches, depression, etc. Sophisticated biofeedback instruments have been developed and constantly inform the user about the changes which are characteristic of stress within his or her body. For example, the intensity of muscle tension, skin temperature, heart rate, blood pressure, etc. Recreation and leisure time activities. Recreation provides an opportunity to let oneself go, become inhibited, thus reducing tension and stress. There are various forms of recreation like music, entertainment, painting, movies, parties, gardening, etc. Recreational pursuits are important to the prevention of the damaging effect of the stress. Leisure time can be used for doing some activities which give pleasure and help in building connections with others. Hobbies can easily be pursued in leisure time. Diet. These days, dietary practices are being used to improve a person's overall health, making him or her less vulnerable to stress. One's lifestyle, occupation, climatic condition, and body constitution should determine both the quantity and the quality of one's diet. A proper diet can prevent stress caused by unhealthy dietary habits. Sleep. Human errors caused by drowsiness and sleepiness may lead to accidents and tragedies. Drowsiness is an urgent warning that should not be ignored. A good night's sleep helps to restore physical resources and increases the stress tolerance level. A person with large sleep debt is more vulnerable to infections and other illness. An increased need for sleep is the body's mechanism for producing the desired recovery. Adults require at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep daily, even though individual differences in sleep patterns and sleep needs vary. Time management. Time management is important for people who maintain a busy schedule. They need to prioritize their activities to avoid stress from time pressure and overtime work. Time management helps to balance work and leisure time activities. Working late may also elevate stress. Working professionals who are dedicated to work are often overworked, which has an adverse effect on their mental and physical well-being. Premature aging is also seen as a consequence of overwork. Behavioral self-control. Individuals can manage their own behavior to reduce stress and can avoid people and situations that they know will put them under stress. It's a type of self-cure technique. Even though cognitive therapy may be used to alter an individual's self-defeating thoughts that unnecessarily cause strain by making him conscious of the effects of these thoughts on his physiological and emotional responses. Networking or social support. Social psychology research has indicated that people benefit from social support. Networking requires forming association with trusted, empathetic people who may be family members, neighbors, or co-workers and colleagues who are good listener and confidence builder. These people provide support whenever needed and help an individual overcome stressful situations. This kind of social emotional support received from personal relationship is necessary for the older people. In the context of the elderly, an effective coping response to stress can be obtained by combining optimal level of exercises, recreational activities, and most importantly, social networks. Since the elderly experience lower family support and medical ailment, recreational program and exercises can promote health management behavior, promote friendship, and compensate for loneliness. Summary: stress is an impinging reality for the elderly. There can be various types of stressors affecting the well-being of the elderly, like micro stressors, meso and macro level stressors. Biopsychological model explain that illness in an old age is not only the result of biological and physical factors but also psychological, social and behavioral factors. The theory of strength and vulnerability integration explains how older adults can experience reductions in physical health yet maintain relatively high level of emotional well-being by focusing on positive experiences. The prevalence of stress is high in the elderly due to factors like loneliness, deterioration physical health, loss, etc. The different coping strategies that are helpful in managing stress are exercise, yoga, meditation, time management, relaxation techniques, recreation and leisure time activities, maintaining proper diet and sleep, behavioral self-control, and maintaining social relationships.